Spring 1914 Aldershot. In wooden racks, the short magazine. Lee Enfield rifles sit oiled and clean. British infantry drill until motion becomes one rhythm. Bolt forward, sights steady, 10 rounds in the magazine and 5-round charges in the pouch. Across the Channel, German conscripts and reservists train with Mauser pattern rifles chambered in 7.92 by 57 mm. The Mauser is praised for strength and precision. The British rifle is called old. The question for this film is clear. Why did British soldiers prefer this rifle when they faced a German small arms system that many observers labelled modern? The answer starts before the war. Between 1899 and 1902, on the veld of South Africa, British columns met mobile marksmen. Committees rewrote musketry. The army shortened the Lee rifle, strengthened sights, and insisted on rapid aimed fire. In 1909, the musketry regulation set a standard that every battalion practiced. 15 aimed rounds in 60 seconds from a supported stance, not spray but a timed drill. The Lee action cocks on closing, effort moves into the forward stroke so the eye stays on the sight. Rear locking lugs allow fast cycling with safe case support. A long sight radius supports practical accuracy. A 10-round magazine reduces pauses. By August 1914, the British Expeditionary Force is small but professional. Companies carry range cards for lanes at Mons-le-Cateau and the Aisne. When German infantry advance over fields and roads, British sections answer with controlled rapid fire. Witnesses report volleys that sounded like hidden machine guns. What matters for us is not legend but method. Repeatable practice under orders and a mechanism that keeps pace. Trench war then redefines the fight. Mud grit and numb hands punish fine tolerances. The Lee Enfield continues to cycle. Charger loading keeps the rifle topped without long pauses. Armourers correct headspace by fitting numbered bolt heads. The soldier notes simple facts. The bolt runs. The sights are readable. The magazine gives margin. These are the stakes. If preference were sentiment, it would fail in mud, sand, and snow. Instead, it persists from Mons to the Rhine. This episode will test where, when, and how that preference produced results that commanders trusted. Summer 1899, South African veld. British columns learn what repeating rifles and dispersed marksmen can do to tight ranks on open ground. The Lee Metford and early Lee Enfield patterns show speed, but sights and training lag behind practice in the field. After the war ends in 1902, London convenes committees to turn hard lessons into doctrine. Rifles will be shortened for handiness. Sights will be clearer. Ammunition will feed by charges, meaning 5-round metal strips that guide cartridges into the magazine in one push. Above all, the infantry will be trained to deliver rapid aimed fire on command, and to hold that pace without losing control of range or target. Hythe Kent becomes the symbol of that change. At the School of Musketry instructors, drill timing position and bolt rhythm until soldiers can perform to a table, not to a guess. The War Office issues Musketry Regulations Part 1 in 1909 with a standard that every battalion can measure on any range. 15 aimed rounds in 60 seconds from a supported stance at the stated distance. The point is not theatrics. The point is to make sections capable of dense bursts of accurate shots that can stop an advance or cover a withdrawal while machine guns are moved. That standard shapes procurement decisions as much as it shapes soldiers. In workshops at Enfield Lock, Birmingham, small arms and London small arms engineers finish what policy begins. The short magazine, Lee Enfield, Mark III, is adopted in 1907. The barrel is shorter than the long rifles of the 19th century, which improves balance when moving through cover and inside trench bays. The rear sight sits far enough from the eye to give a long sight radius that stabilizes aim. Protective ears guard the front sight. The charger bridge cut into the receiver allows quick loading in 2 motions for a full magazine of 10 rounds. A 2-stage trigger offers a clear wall before the shot breaks. The action cocks on closing. That means the pressure needed to cock the firing pin is applied on the forward stroke after extraction. The shooter can lift the bolt with little disturbance to the sight picture, then drive it home with the palm while the tip of the index finger resets on the trigger. Rear locking lugs reduce opening effort and allow a smooth sweep, even when dust or fouling is present. Armourers accept that rear locking lugs create more case stretch than front locking lugs. They plan for it with gauges and with replaceable bolt heads marked in sizes to maintain safe headspace. The rifle is designed as a system to be maintained in the field by unit armourers rather than retired to depots for new bolts to be hand-fitted. Ammunition evolves with the weapon. The 303 Mark VII cartridge enters service in 1910 with a light-nose heavy base bullet that flies flat for battlefield distances and stabilizes quickly. Typical muzzle velocity sits around 744 meters per second from a service barrel. Charges are issued in bandoliers so that the rifleman can refill his magazine in 2 pushes without handling loose rounds. The 10-round capacity halves the interruption frequency compared to 5-round designs when delivering short, intense strings. That is not a matter of fashion. It is a direct response to the tempo that musketry tables demand. The British Expeditionary Force that mobilizes in August 1914 is small by continental standards, but saturated with instructors who know how to run range cards and section fire plans. Each company has trained men to estimate distance under pressure and to call corrections by landmarks. Map practice is linked to the rifle. Range flags and aiming posts prepare soldiers to hold lanes at known distances. Non-commissioned officers enforce the discipline that converts individual speed into collective effect. The rifle is at the center of that plan because it is the one weapon that every man carries and that every platoon can bring to bear without delay. Across the North Sea, German policy traces a different path. The Gewehr 98 of 1898 and its carbine successors are strong front-locking designs chambered in 7.92 by 57 mm. In 1905, Germany adopts a sharp-pointed bullet that drives muzzle velocity to roughly 860 meters per second in service loads. The open-notch rear sight and barleycorn front are precise for slow fire and excellent for marksmanship at distance. The internal magazine holds 5 rounds and loads by a 5-round charger that strips cleanly into the receiver. The bolt cocks on opening. That gives primary extraction power and a firm cam at the top of the lift. For a deliberate rifleman in clean conditions, the system is superb. German doctrine will soon center platoon firepower on the machine gun. Rifles will serve as support to bring belts and to protect the gun. In that doctrine, the marginal speed difference between bolt actions matters less. The British pathway from 1907 to 1914 treats the rifle as the primary instrument of platoon fire until a machine gun can be laid. That choice drives training calendars and logistics. Territorial force units adopt the same musketry tables with adjustments for range availability. Annual camps devote long hours to known distance and snap shooting. Recruits learn to seat charges without bending feed lips and to top off during pauses so that the rifle is always close to full. The magazine cut-off that allows the rifle to be fed as a single loader in older drill is present on the Mark III, but de-emphasized in combat practice and later deleted in the Mark III Star to speed production. The rifle is taught as a magazine-fed repeater, first and last. Industrial considerations are not incidental. Birmingham small arms and London small arms tool up for high volume with interchangeable parts within defined limits. The War Office expects wartime expansion and writes procedures so that a trained armourer with gauges can take a rifle with excess headspace and return it to service by selecting a larger bolt head. That is a plan to keep rifles in sections rather than on racks. Spares kits include extractors, springs and firing pins in numbers that match realistic failure states. The textbook of small arms and armourer manuals describe acceptable roughness in the action and how to lap without weakening lugs. The intent is practical serviceability under strain, not artisanal perfection for a bench rest. The build-up to war tightens every thread. In 1912 and 1913, summer maneuvers practice company defense with staggered fields of fire and reserve magazines held back for counter-moves. Instructors remind men that rapid fire is a controlled drill, not a panic dump. The standard is still 15 aimed rounds in 1 minute, but the teaching links that minute to a purpose. Hold the lane while the right platoon moves. Break the forming line at a hedge. Cover a gun team crossing a road. The rifle is embedded in a choreography that will matter when armies collide along the canals and roads of Belgium and northern France. Equipment detail supports that choreography. Slings are set for loop support when time allows. Sights are zeroed at known distances. Soldiers learn to use the fine adjustable windage on early sights and to hold off when later economy patterns remove that feature. Cleaning kits include pull-through cords and oil bottles that keep the chamber film thin so grit does not paste into a paste that seizes extraction. Instructors signal that a smooth, dry chamber and a lightly oiled bolt body are worth more than obsessive barrel shine. The object is a rifle that will run in rain and dust and cold. British procurement also considers sight picture. The open rear sight on the Mark III is serviceable in daylight, but ordnance officers note that a rear aperture offers faster alignment under low light and stress. Experiments begin before the Second War and come to fruition in the rifle No. 4 Mark I, with its robust peep and protected front blade. That later step inherits the same action and the same charger loading method. The through line from 1907 to the late 1930s is continuity of handling. A soldier trained to work a Lee action in 1914 will find the rhythm unchanged in 1940. All of these elements define causes before a shot is fired in anger. The British Army prefers the Lee Enfield family because training doctrine, logistics, and mechanical design are aligned around human speed under command. The rifle is not a museum holdover. It is the expression of a system learned at cost in South Africa, refined at Hythe, Kent, and validated on ranges across the islands. German practice reaches a different equilibrium that esteems machine guns as the core of platoon combat power and treats the rifle as accurate and durable, but not the primary producer of fire density. When the British Expeditionary Force goes to France in August 1914, these systems meet. The stage is set for the opening moves at Mons and at Le Cateau, where sections will test whether drill tables translate to ground held in yards and roads cleared by minutes. Dawn 23, August 1914, Mons Canal Line. Mist hangs over the water and the slag heaps on the horizon. British infantry companies occupy bridges and culverts that the engineers have checked and marked on range cards. Platoon sergeants walk the parapet and confirm sectors by hedge and road bend. Each section leader repeats distances to the nearest 100 yards and checks that men have charges loose in the left pocket and the magazine topped to 10. The order is to hold until told to withdraw toward the south. The British Expeditionary Force is outnumbered and must trade ground for time. The rifle will carry a heavy share of that trade. Late morning German advance guards appear in waves along roads and field tracks north of Nîmes and Aubourg. They deploy into skirmish order under the eyes of the British forward companies. German officers send probing groups toward the canal bridges. British fire discipline holds until section leaders give the signal. Rapid fire begins when the first line of grey coats clears the last field boundary before the open ground to the water. Soldiers settle the front blade in the notch and drive the bolt with the heel of the hand. 5 rounds enter from a charger and the thumb pushes the stack down. The second charger seats without drama. The bolt closes. The rifle speaks again. Men count in their heads and breathe in the pauses between strings. Casualties rise on the far bank. German companies hug cover and bring forward machine guns to answer. At Nîmes Bridge, a battalion of the Royal Fusiliers fights around a span that matters for the whole position. They feed cartridges by charger and steady the sight at the known distance. The Lee action cocks on closing and the motion becomes familiar and quick. German machine guns set up to suppress the bridgehead. Firefights cross the canal with a harsh rhythm. British officers commit small reserves to hold the bridge a little longer. German pressure continues to climb as more units arrive behind the forward screen. British batteries fire shrapnel over the waterway and adjust by telephones and runners. The rifle line uses the shells as a mask for small shifts of position and then settles to shoot again. By early afternoon, orders reach battalions to begin a measured withdrawal from the canal line. The move is not a rout. Companies peel back by bounds while a rear element holds and fires. The rifle makes this drill possible because each section can deliver a dense minute of shots on order and then move. Men top up during cover and check that mud has not pasted into the chamber. Magazine cutoffs are left open. The rifle is treated as a repeater at all times because speed matters. German infantry cross the canal where bridges fall. Engineers blow some spans but not all. The fight rolls south through villages and along sunken lanes. Casualties and prisoners go both ways. The British Expeditionary Force remains intact, but must keep moving. The retreat continues on 24th of August and 25th of August with rearguard actions that repeat a pattern. British battalions occupy a short ridgeline or a village edge. They lay range cards and pick out aiming marks. Machine guns cover lanes and crossroads. Rifle sections fill the gaps and create a wider field of controlled fire than 2 machine guns can manage by themselves. German artillery probes and then brackets. German infantry presses in. British sections deliver rapid fire in short controlled blasts when a push forms. When orders arrive to fall back, the rifle line breaks contact by small groups while others watch and shoot. The 10-round magazine and charger loading halves the pause count during these short blasts. That matters when 30 seconds of steady shots can stop a rush and buy time for a road to clear. On 26th of August, the army fights at Le Cateau. Ground north of the town gives fields of fire to long slopes. British divisions dig in shallow and sight their guns and rifles for a stand. The sun lifts and shows German columns assembling, counter-battery duels open, then infantry presses forward in mass along the whole front. British gunners fire over open sights at ranges that shrink as the day goes on. Rifle sections on the flanks and in defiles pour out controlled rapid fire at set distances without waiting for orders to expend to the last round. Section leaders set a tempo that matches ammunition supply. No one claims that rifle fire replaces machine guns here. It is one piece among guns and bayonets and grit. Yet officers and soldiers record that when attacks formed on a dead ground edge, the first answer was a hard minute from the rifles. German reports note heavy losses where lines bunched on the forward slope and met that curtain of shots. Heat and dust, foul actions on both sides. The Lee Enfield bolt keeps running under a thin film of oil. When a rifle stiffens, the soldier wipes the bolt body on a sleeve and relubricates from the butt trap bottle. Armourers in the rear strip and swap bolt heads with a gauge to keep headspace safe. Runners carry charges forward and carry messages back. The fight runs until afternoon. Orders to break contact come late. Units leave guns behind to save the line. Rifle sections cover the withdrawal path to the south. The day is costly, but the army escapes destruction. The rifle has paid its share by turning chosen minutes into dense controlled fire that blunts close assaults and slows pursuit. The retreat does not end the opening moves. Through the last days of August, companies march long hours and then fight short, violent stands. The rifle is heavy on the strap and rough on the hands. Men clean at halts and sleep in ditches. German cavalry probes into gaps and screens the advance of fresh infantry. British scouts take snapshots from hedges and empty barns. The Lee Enfield carries well in these moments because the action can be worked while the stock is still pressed to the shoulder. A quick palm forward and a reset on the trigger prepares the next shot without breaking the sightline. 5 more cartridges drop in from a charger when there is a break. The magazine returns to 10. The soldier moves again. Early September brings a change. German armies swing east of Paris. French counter-moves open a chance. The British Expeditionary Force turns north and attacks toward the Marne. Rifle sections now must cross open ground under fire in small rushes. The Lee Enfield has no special trick for this phase beyond trust. The shooter knows the bolt will work when breath is short and hands shake. Men take cover behind haystacks and walls. They fire quick pairs and top up. The rifle supports the pace because a full magazine means 2 short pauses to refill instead of 4. Small numbers matter when each pause is a second with the head down. After the Marne, the line shifts again toward the Aisne. Rivers and chalk ridges channel movement. German units entrench on the heights. British units push across bridges and climb. Fog and rain come and go. The first trenches begin as shelter holes and deepen into lines. Here the rifle becomes the daily tool that patrols and watches and fires single-aimed shots. The open rear sight on the Mark III is adequate in daylight but coarse in dusk. Men learn to hold center mass and to shade for wind by feel. Drizzle streaks the wood. Mud cakes boots and hands. The Lee bolt still closes with a clean cam and pushes grit aside. Mauser bolts on the other side also work with determination and care. Both sides learn that small arms must be kept clean and oiled or they stop at the worst possible time. In trench watch, the rifleman builds a routine. He keeps charges in the left pocket with mouths up for a clean grab. He keeps one charger set for a known alarm, with the cartridges staggered to feed smoothly. He wipes the chamber dry after rain. He keeps the bolt face clear. He checks that the front sight blade is square in the notch every hour, because fatigue and darkness play tricks. If an alarm comes at a sap head or a listening post, he cycles by feel and fires a single shot or a short pair. He tops up immediately. The 2-charger cycle returns the magazine to 10 and preserves the margin that the company commander expects every man to hold. Raids and patrols begin to feed the intelligence machine. Rifle fire plays a limited role at the moment of entry because stealth matters. Yet the rifle remains the exit ticket when things go wrong. A raiding party that breaks contact in the wire must have covering fire to cross the parapet. Lewis guns will later become the preferred tool, but early on, the only answer in many places is a hard minute from rifles on the fire step. Section leaders count down, and men work the bolt until the whistle calls cease. The power is not mystical. It is a product of training and a mechanism that allows speed without loss of control. Through late September and into October, the line stretches north in the race to the sea. Rail movements and marches leapfrog units to Flanders. Ditches and canals and brick villages set a new geometry. The rifle remains at the center of the platoon unless a machine gun is on the spot. German attacks try to break through on narrow fronts. British companies use their last reserves and dig. The rifle answers again with short, hard bursts at set ranges when the enemy forms in the mist. Some episodes create the impression that hidden machine guns are at work. The truth is simpler. 100 men trained to deliver 15 aimed shots in 1 minute and armed with rifles that cycle quickly can put out a sudden sheet of fire. The sound and effect resemble automatic weapons to those under it. That effect does not last for long because arms tire and barrels heat and ammunition thins. It lasts long enough to break a single rush. In these opening moves, that single broken rush preserves a battalion and sometimes a wider front. The first winter brings cold that bites through wool. Rifle bolts grow stiff at dawn when frost forms on metal. Soldiers learn to strip and oil in the dugout and to cycle the action several times before first light to break the crust. Fires are forbidden near the parapet. Moist breath condenses on sights. Men shade the rear notch with a hand and learn to use the full width of the blade as a crude ghost ring in low light. These are field adaptations that live in notebooks and in lessons learned sheets. They exist because a rifle that can be run by touch gives the shooter a path through weather and stress. Opening moves, and not with a formal curtain, but with a gradual acceptance that trenches will dominate. The rifle keeps its place because it fills every hour that a machine gun cannot cover and because it scales from a single shot at a loophole to a 1-minute burst that can stop a rush. The short magazine, Lee Enfield, did not decide battles alone at Mons and Le Cateau and the Eisen. It never could. Artillery and terrain and command choices set the frame. Within that frame, the rifle gave British sections a practical tool for creating time and space under pressure. Men saw that in August and September and wrote it into habit. That habit would carry forward as the line froze and as new weapons arrived. The opening phase had proved one plain fact. A well-trained soldier with a rifle designed for speed and control could still shape a fight at the company scale and could still buy the army another mile of road and another day to regroup. Rain moves in before dawn on the Somme in July 1916 and turns chalk to paste. In the forward bays section, leaders pass down the last checks. Cartridges are stripped into 10-round magazines. Chargers ride in left pockets with mouths up. Bolts are cycled once to feel the cam on closing and to clear any grit from the lugs. The order from battalion is plain. When German counterattack parties form on the forward slope after our barrage lifts, the first answer is controlled rapid fire from the fire step until platoon machine guns can be laid. It is not a myth or a boast. It is a drill written into the company scheme and rehearsed on practice ranges for years. The decisive thing is not that a single rifle can fire quickly, but that a whole section can produce a hard minute on command and stop a rush before it crests the lip of the trench. The barrage falls silent in patches, and German infantry come up through shell smoke in squads and half platoons. British non-commissioned officers call ranges already inked on the card. 200 yards to the smashed willow, 300 yards to the broken wire picket. The order goes out. Rapid fire, rifles settle, sights shade under the hand. The Lee action works with a forward shove that keeps the eye in the rear notch. 5 cartridges are pressed down from a charger, and 5 more follow without delay. The 10-round well allows a longer string before the left hand leaves the fore end. The rhythm is simple and shared across the section. Breathe, press, palm the bolt. Press. After 10, the pause is short and counted. Chargers in. Bolt home. Fire again. The effect is local and decisive. Assault parties that would have reached the parapet are cut down on the forward slope not by scattered shooting, but by an instruction turned into practiced speed with a mechanism built to sustain that speed. Companies hold ground they would otherwise have yielded because the first 30 to 60 seconds are filled with aimed shots that arrive faster than a 5-round cycle can normally deliver. By autumn 1916, the British line has learned that mud will punish any weapon with close tolerances. The short magazine. Lee Enfield continues to close and lock in grime because the effort peak sits in the forward stroke. Men who have been awake for 20 hours with numb fingers can still drive the bolt home and feel its seat. The German Mauser pattern across the lines remains accurate and strong but demands the main effort at the top of the lift. In clean weather, the difference is minor. In sleet and paste, it is felt as seconds lost and shots delayed. Armourers respond with a routine that is now part of the decisive action. At company rest, the sergeant armourer gauges headspace. If it drifts, he fits the next bolt head size and stamps the log. Rifles stay with their sections instead of being sent to depots. In a battle of endurance, that policy keeps more weapons in the line on any given morning, and that availability changes outcomes at the margin where minutes decide control of a traverse or a sap. Arras in April 1917 gives a clearer view of decision. British battalions break into German positions over ground that allows observation and counter-thrusts. Each time German reserves mass for a push, the local commander must win 2 races. Machine guns must be sighted and brought to bear. Ammunition must reach the front fast enough. The rifle carries the gap. Section leaders instruct their men to hold fire until the forward edge of the mass touches a pre-marked hedge or road. Then the order for rapid fire is given for a timed slice. The Lee action and 10-round magazine convert that order into a dense volley that shocks the leading files before the enemy reaches a range where grenades dominate. Ammunition bearers feed chargers forward under cover while the hard minute runs. When the order to cease comes, rifles top up to 10 in 2 motions and the section shifts position. That cycle repeats 2 or 3 times in a single hour, and at Arras holds the ground long enough for belt-fed guns to claim the deeper lanes. The turning point is not a single hero's shot. It is the proof that a trained group with this rifle can impose tempo on a chaotic fight and buy the time for the heavier weapons to take over. The year turns again and water fills shell holes at 3rd Ypres. Rifles foul, men slip on duckboards. The action that cocks on closing still bites through the mess. Soldiers adapt their handling. They strip oil from the chamber to avoid case drag. They polish the feed lips lightly so chargers do not snag. They carry one charger with cartridges set a hair low to seat perfectly when mud has thickened on the follower. These are field refinements made because the weapon is central to survival when a machine gun is not at hand. When German units launch night raids, the first response is not a searchlight or a belt-fed gun. It is 4 or 5 rifles per bay magazines, already full bolts, already tested, ready to put out a short, violent burst on the final approach. Patrols that would have overrun a weak spot collapse in the last yards. Trenches that would have changed hands stay under British control. The big map hardly moves, yet the pattern of small saved positions accumulates into the preservation of a divisional front. The rifle and its specific handling characteristics are part of that sum. The spring of 1918 brings the German offensives and a more open fight. Villages and copses become stop lines. British and Commonwealth units withdraw by bounds and then counter-thrust to seal gaps. Here, the rifle's decisive quality is speed while moving. A section that drops into a hedgerow can deliver 10 aimed shots quickly at a crossing and then move before the enemy brings a machine gun to bear. The difference between a 7-second and a 9-second cycle is not dramatic on a range. In a fight where a runner must cross 30 meters before a gun is laid, that difference is the space in which he lives or dies. Orders put it bluntly: hold this lane for 1 minute, then go. The Lee Enfield was designed to make that order feasible under fatigue and stress, and in 1918 it shows why preference becomes doctrine rather than nostalgia. Armistice closes one war but does not end the pattern. The interwar years bring the adoption of the rifle No. 4 Mark I with its aperture rear sight and the same action. When British forces deploy to France in 1939, many battalions still carry the short magazine. Lee Enfield No. 1 mark a 3rd star. The retreat of May 1940 is a textbook case of why this family remains preferred. Roadblocks must be held for minutes at a time while trapped vehicles are turned and civilians are cleared. Rifle sections face motorcycle troops and groups of infantry probing for a gap. The order is the same as it was at Le Cateau. 1 hard minute to break the rush. The 10-round magazine halves the interruption count during that minute. Charger loading refills the well in 2 motions during the pause before the next rush. Units that cannot cover a lane with a belt-fed gun still deny it long enough to withdraw. The rifle is not the only factor, but without it, those rearguards would be shorter and the encirclements deeper. North Africa shifts the decisive action to dust and heat. Fine sand sneaks into every joint. The rifle No. 4, Mark I and its elder sibling, keep cycling with thin oil and a clean chamber. At Operation Crusader and later at El Alamein platoon, plans hinge on Bren guns for sustained fire Yet every company commander knows there will be angles the Bren cannot cover. When German infantry forms to exploit a breach at 200 meters, the order falls to the nearest rifles. The peep sight of the rifle number 4 Mark I gives a fast, clear picture to tired eyes in glare. Men work the bolt without lifting the head. 5 cartridges drop in from a charger, then 5 more. Targets that would have reached the wire hit the ground. The fight then moves again to where armor and artillery settle accounts. Preference for the Lee action is renewed not because it is romantic, but because it turns an immediate order into immediate controlled fire under conditions that punish slower drills. Italy in 1944 stresses another quality. Street corners and stairwells compress time. A rifle that can be run in close quarters without breaking the sightline matters. British and Canadian units in Ortona learn to smash through walls and clear rooms where targets present for a heartbeat in shadow. The aperture sight helps men to find a sight picture through dust. The action that cocks on closing lets a shooter run the bolt with the heel while the trigger finger resets. Snap pairs land fast enough to win the exchange before an opponent can raise a weapon from a doorway. The same holds in mountain positions where German counterattacks climb narrow spines and appear suddenly at short range. The section that can throw 20 aimed rounds in the first 10 seconds of contact forces the assault to ground before it crests the ridge. That is not theory. It is the kind of small decision that keeps a company on a hill it was ordered to hold. In Burma, the rifle number 5 Mark I, the jungle carbine appears with lighter weight and shorter barrel. It keeps the Lee action. Soldiers discover that in wet heat and sudden ambush, the action's rhythm is what matters most. At Kohima and Imphal, British and Indian units defend perimeters where rain turns steps into slick clay. When Japanese attacks hit at dusk, rifle sections often fire first while light machine guns are repositioned. Bolts run, charges feed, the aperture sight is quick in gloom. When the rush breaks, the line still stands and ammunition is redistributed. The decisive action in a jungle perimeter is measured in half minutes at the wire. A mechanism that shaves hesitation from each shot stacks those half minutes into survival. Northwest Europe in 1944 and 1945 adds a final layer to the turning point story. Bocage terrain breaks sightlines and creates sudden near-field fights at hedgerow gaps. A section that can flood a gap with fast, accurate fire in the first heartbeat keeps defenders pinned long enough for a grenade or a Bren gun to settle the issue. At Rauray and in the Low Countries, British riflemen describe pushing the bolt forward with the palm while staying on the peep, a movement passed down from the generation that learned on the older rifle. Snipers with the rifle number 4T pick off observers and machine gun crews beyond 200 meters and then melt back while rifle sections cover with rapid strings. Bridges over small rivers are seized and held for minutes against counter-thrusts by a handful of men whose main firepower is the rifle. Those minutes are the currency of an advance, and the Lee pattern pays out reliably. The logistics behind these actions are part of the decisive mechanism. British depots package 303 cartridges in chargers and bandoliers to match the rifle's loading scheme. Ammunition bearers are trained to deliver clips, not loose rounds, so that the first refill is always 2 motions, not a handful of fumbling. Armourers carry gauges to measure headspace and carry graded bolt heads to correct it at once. Cleaning kits are standardized and teach a balance of lubrication that keeps the chamber nearly dry and the bolt body thinly oiled. These are not minor details. They are the scaffolding that lets a rifle section do the 1-minute job at any hour without waiting for a specialist weapon. When a commander writes an order that assumes the rifles will hold a lane for 60 seconds, the supply and maintenance habits make that assumption safe. German small unit doctrine through the Second War places the machine gun at the heart of the squad. That doctrine is sound and deadly. It means, however, that the bolt-action rifle is not asked to be fast under stress in the same way. And the 5-round magazine remains acceptable because the belt-fed gun is the primary source of fire density. British doctrine in practice often finds gaps where the Bren gun is not yet laid or has a limited arc. In those gaps, the section's rifles must behave like a temporary machine gun for half a minute. The Lee action with a 10-round well and charger loading is the only bolt action in wide service that consistently meets that demand across weather and exhaustion. That is the reason preference hardens into identity over 2 wars. By the time British units cross the lower Rhine in early 1945, the pattern is complete. Platoons move in bounds through villages and orchards. When a corner is taken, the first defense is a line of rifles on the near side. Magazines full bolts, tested sights set to 100 or 200 meters. If a counter-thrust appears down a lane, the order is the same as it was on the Somme nearly 9 years before. Rapid fire, the Lee pattern delivers the immediate answer, and the section buys the minute needed for the Bren to shift and for the platoon commander to call a gun. Preference is no longer just the habit of veterans, it is the practical expectation of the whole army. This is the turning point drawn out over many engagements rather than one. A rifle that lets a human being keep eyes on the sight while working the action that holds 10 rounds to extend the first string that refills in 2 motions and that tolerates mud dust and cold without seizing becomes the decisive tool whenever the plan demands a fast, hard minute from ordinary soldiers. The short magazine, Lee Enfield, and the rifle number 4, Mark I, do that job. The German Mauser family, excellent in many roles, is embedded in a different system that leans on the machine gun. Each choice is rational within its doctrine. The British preference lasts because their rifle sections are repeatedly asked to win the first minute of contact, and this mechanism coupled to this training wins that minute often enough to matter. Winter settles over the line in 1914 and then over every year that follows. The rifle remains in the hands of the private soldier for every hour that a machine gun is not present. That simple fact shapes results after each engagement. Companies record that sudden counterattacks are blunted most often by a short period of controlled rapid fire from the firestep or from a hedge. Commanders note that the weapon that answers first is usually the Lee Enfield, and that the answer is repeatable. This pattern hardens into orders. Hold this lane for 1 minute, then move. The rifle makes that order possible again and again. The immediate consequence is terrain held for another hour and routes kept open for another convoy. These minutes do not look dramatic on a map. They decide whether a battalion remains intact at dusk. As the First War ends, the British Army will not discard the mechanism that has proven most reliable under mud and fatigue. The short magazine, Lee Enfield, remains on strength while ordnance studies sight, picture, and weight. The result is the rifle number 4 Mark I with a stiff barrel and an aperture rear sight that speeds alignment under stress. The action is unchanged because soldiers trust it and armourers can keep it in tolerance by swapping bolt heads at unit level. A change that might have asked for new gauges or depot fitting is rejected. The Army prefers a pattern that a sergeant armourer can service at a table in a barn and return to the section within an hour. The institutional memory of retreats and rearguards makes that preference firm. Industry adjusts to the same logic. Factories cut steel and wood to interchange within defined limits so that parts from one batch run in another. Magazines are kept as unit property matched to rifles to preserve feed lip geometry. Charges are produced in numbers that match realistic wastage and are shipped in bandoliers so that ammunition supply aligns with the method of loading. These are consequences in procurement files that grow from one operational truth. The rifle section must be able to restore a full magazine in 2 motions and then work the bolt without hesitation. Anything that delays that cycle costs yards and lives. After the war, the files keep this standard as a requirement for all new production. Doctrine evolves with the new machine gun balance. British platoons now center much of their staying power on the Bren gun. Yet every field exercise still treats the rifle as the immediate filler of gaps when the light machine gun is out of arc or when a team is on the move. Manuals keep the timed rapid-fire drill because it gives a shared rhythm inside a section. 15 aimed rounds in 60 seconds remains a table not as a myth but as a common language between a sergeant and a private. The consequence is that recruits in the late 1930s learn a method that matches the weapon they will carry in France and in North Africa. When war returns, the habit is already there. In 1940, the retreat to the Channel tests this continuity. Units that keep roadblocks open for 10 minutes under pressure do so with rifles and grenades, while heavier weapons are pulled back by hand. Afterward, quartermasters report that charger packets and oil bottles ran short more often than other small stores. Staff officers write that resupply plans must privilege chargers and bandoliers because the rifle is the only weapon that every man can bring to bear at once. The lesson becomes a logistics directive. The consequence is trains and lorries packed to match actual use rather than ideal tables. In a force that fights for time and distance, this detail helps to prevent local collapse. North Africa adds a mechanical consequence. Fine dust shows which actions can run with a thin film of oil and a dry chamber, and which cannot. The Lee pattern keeps cycling with simple care that soldiers can deliver in the field. Armourers record fewer rifles out of action for headspace or extraction faults than expected. German rifles across the field also run well when clean. The difference lies in how a tired man can keep his sights while he works the bolt, and how many rounds he can deliver before the first pause to reload. Sections that use the number 4 peep sight and 2 charger rhythm can flood a 200-meter gap with accurate shots in the first 10 seconds of contact. That ability shapes how platoon leaders plan corner fights and how they assign arcs. The consequence is a quiet doctrinal shift. Maps place rifle arcs where the Bren cannot see or cannot yet reach. The rifle becomes the known bridge between quiet and sustained fire. Italy brings urban and mountain consequences. In towns where rooms are dark and targets present for a heartbeat, a rifle that can be run without lifting the head from the stock is a survival tool. Reports from Ortona describe snap pairs that decide doorways. On ridges, the same quality decides whether a crest is held when a counterattack breaks from cover at 50 meters. These are consequences measured in squads and stairwells. They add up to battalions that complete orders to hold or to clear. The rifle is not a talisman. It is a mechanism that allows a human being to push the fight a little faster than the enemy in the first moments of surprise. That edge is small. In a war of attrition, many small edges accumulate into major outcomes. Burma adds weather and weight. The rifle number 5, Mark I, reduces length and mass and keeps the action. The gain is handiness in jungle paths, and the cost is sharper recoil and some shift in zero with heat. Units accept the trade because the decisive need remains the same. When an attack hits a perimeter at dusk, the first defense is a ring of rifles that can throw fast-aimed shots through the gloom, while light machine guns are repositioned. The consequence is that a patrol survives to dawn and that ammunition can be redistributed in calm rather than in panic. The mechanism in the hands of the soldier again turns minutes into survival. By 1945, the line in northwest Europe shows the mature form of these consequences. Rifle sections expect to buy 1 minute whenever a plan needs it. Platoon leaders write orders with that expectation. Company commanders cite weapons with that expectation. Supply officers deliver charger bandoliers with that expectation. The culture of musketry that began after the South African War remains alive, not as nostalgia, but as an operating standard that keeps small units from breaking in the first shock of contact. The German army that leans on belt-fed guns fights with equal skill, yet operates under a different assumption about who delivers the first mass of fire. Each system works within its frame. The British frame produces an attachment to the Lee pattern that is rational in light of how tasks are assigned. After the war, the Army keeps the rifle number 4 Mark I in wide service and trains a generation of reservists on it. Commonwealth forces carry the pattern in local conflicts because it is accurate enough, durable enough, and fast enough for their tasks, and because armourers can maintain it with simple gauges. Police forces and civil defence units keep rifles in racks for emergencies. The public memory wraps the mechanism in stories of the mad minute and in claims about Mons that are sometimes overstated. The quieter truth sits in training halls and in decades of field notes. A rifle that can be loaded in 2 motions and worked without losing the sight picture helps ordinary soldiers do hard jobs under stress. There are limits, and these limits shape later choices. Against an opponent armed with a true self-loading rifle, the bolt action cannot match sustained volume without a machine gun in support. For that reason, Britain will move in the late 1950s to a self-loading pattern chambered in 7.62 by 51 mm. That decision does not erase the earlier preference. It marks a change in doctrine and in industrial capacity that allows a new system to carry the first minute as well as the next 5. The consequence for the Lee family is dignified retirement from the front line and long service in training and in reserve. The final consequence is historiographic. Debates about whether rifle fire at Mons sounded like machine guns will continue. Figures about rates and casualties will be argued. What stands beyond dispute is that British commanders trusted their rifle sections to create decisive moments and wrote orders that relied on that trust. The soldiers delivered those moments with the short Magazine Lee Enfield and with the rifle number 4 Mark I across mud, heat, snow, and stone. That is the aftermath that matters most. Preference survived contact because it solved the problem that kept returning. Hold this lane now, then move. Culturally, the rifle acquired a symbolic weight out of proportion to its steel and wood. The phrase mad minute entered public memory, sometimes oversold, but rooted in printed standards and peacetime drills. Veterans passed down a very specific handling rhythm palm, the bolt forward while the eye stays on the sight, that became part of regimental identity. In museums and collections, the action still invites demonstration because it makes a mechanical promise a human can keep under stress. When self-loading rifles spread after the Second War, the tactical frame changed. Sustained volume became the job of every rifleman, not only the belt-fed gun. Britain moved to a self-loading pattern for sound reasons of doctrine and industry, but the earlier preference remains intelligible. From Mons to the lower Rhine, a mechanism and a training system worked together to win the first minute often enough to matter. That is the enduring assessment and the legacy that explains why British soldiers preferred their Lee Enfields when it counted.